in the deepest silence of the night. Long before the air raid sirens wail or the radar screens flicker with the ghosts of confusion, the outcome of the battle has already been decided by a shadow that doesn't exist. It is a machine that defies the very intuition of flight, a jagged slice of obsidian carved from the void itself, sweeping through the stratosphere with the grace of a predator and the destructive power of an apocalypse. This is the Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit, the United States Air Force's heavy strategic stealth bomber, a weapon so advanced, so prohibitively expensive, and so aesthetically alien that it feels less like an aircraft and more like a tear in the fabric of reality. For over 3 decades, this flying wing has served as the tip of the American spear, the unseen architect of shock and awe, capable of delivering conventional or nuclear ruin to any coordinate on the globe within hours, returning to its climate-controlled hangars in Missouri before the dust has even settled over the craters it left behind. The story of the B-2 is not just a catalog of missions, it is a dramatic saga of Cold War paranoia, engineering marvels, crushing failures, and the terrifying quiet of modern aerial warfare. To understand the Spirit, one must first understand the fear that birthed it. In the twilight years of the Cold War, the Soviet Union had constructed the most dense and sophisticated air defense network in human history. A curtain of steel and radar designed to swat the B-52 Stratofortress out of the sky like a slow-moving fly. Washington needed a knife that could slip between the ribs of that defense. A bomber that was invisible to the electronic eyes of the enemy. The project began in the deepest secrecy of the Black World. Budget under the codename Senior CJ, and later the Advanced Technology Bomber ATB program. The goal was audacious, to resurrect the flying wing concept championed by aviation pioneer Jack Northrop decades earlier, design that eliminated the tail, the fuselage, and every vertical surface that could reflect a radar wave. When the first B-2 finally rolled out of the hangar at Air Force Plant 42 in Palmdale, California, on November 22, 1988, the gathered crowd and the press were kept at a specific distance, ensuring they could not see the engine exhausts or the complex curvature of the rear trailing edge. Even in its public debut, the B-2 was hiding. As it took to the sky for the first time in 1989, it looked like a boomerang thrown by a giant, banking against the San Gabriel Mountains. A vision of the future that rendered every other bomber instantly obsolete. But the B-2's true baptism by fire would not come against the Soviets. The Cold War ended, the Berlin Wall fell, and the massive fleet of 132 bombers was slashed to just 21 due to the staggering price tag over $2 billion per aircraft. The critics roared louder than the engines, calling it a hangar queen that would dissolve in the rain, a waste of taxpayer money that would never see combat. The pilots of the 509th Bomb Wing at Whiteman Air Force Base, the spiritual descendants of the unit that dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, waited in silence. Their chance to prove the skeptics wrong arrived in March 1909 over the fractured and burning landscape of Kosovo. Operation Allied Force was the B-2's combat debut, and the mission profile was punishingly simple. Fly from Missouri to Yugoslavia, drop the ordnance, and fly back. There were no forward bases, no pit stops. It was a 30-hour non-stop commute to war. On the night of March 24, 1999, the Spirits took off into the dark. Inside the cockpit, a cramped 2-person office filled with multifunction displays and the hum of classified avionics. The pilots managed their fatigue with a calculated mix of caffeine and naps on a small cot tucked behind the ejection seats. They were flying into the teeth of the Serbian air defenses, systems that had already downed an F-117 Nighthawk, the invisible fighter. The tension in the cockpit was absolute as they crossed into enemy airspace. On radar screens below, the B-2 appeared as nothing more than a bird or a large insect. A ghost signal that operators dismissed until it was too late. The bomb bay doors snapped open, shattering the stealth profile for mere seconds. And the B-2 released a new kind of terror, the Joint Direct Attack Munition, JDAM. These satellite-guided bombs corrected their course in flight, steering through clouds and smoke to strike with mathematical precision. The B-2 South destroyed 33% of all Serbian targets in the first 8 weeks of the war, flying less than 1% of the total sorties. They erased airfields, command bunkers, and ammunition depots, then vanished back across the Atlantic, landing in Missouri as the sun rose over the Midwest. The Hangar Queen had become the assassin of the Balkans. The world changed forever. On September 11, 2001, and the B-2 was called to answer the attacks on New York and Washington with a response that would stretch the limits of human and mechanical endurance. Operation Enduring Freedom required the United States to strike the Taliban and Al-Qaeda deep within landlocked Afghanistan, a target on the other side of the planet. The logistics were a nightmare, but the B-2 made them possible. In the opening nights of the war, B-2s launched from Whiteman for missions that shattered aviation records. The Spirit of America and her sister ships flew across the Pacific, refueled multiple times by flying gas stations in the dark, and crossed into Afghan airspace to deliver their payloads on cave complexes and training camps. But the mission didn't end there. Instead of returning home immediately, some aircraft flew to Diego Garcia, a tiny coral atoll in the Indian Ocean. There, In the sweltering tropical heat, the engines were kept running a hot pit service. The pilots, exhausted and dehydrated after 44 hours in the air, climbed out, and a fresh crew climbed in. The aircraft was refueled, rearmed, and launched again for another combat sortie before finally returning to the United States. One mission lasted over 70 hours. It was a demonstration of global reach that was physically terrifying to the enemy. The idea that a bomber could take off from the American heartland and kill you in the Hindu Kush a day later was a psychological weapon as potent as the bombs themselves. As the global war on terror expanded, the B-2 became the opening act for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Operation Iraqi Freedom began with a decapitation strike aimed at the Iraqi leadership. Under the cover of a moonless night, B-2 South slipped into the most heavily defended airspace in the Middle East. Baghdad was a fortress of anti-aircraft, artillery, and surface-to-air missiles, a kaleidoscope of tracer fire and explosions. The B-2 pilots, trusting in their stealth coding and the complex geometry of their airframes, flew directly over the city. They were the silent partners in the shock and awe campaign, dropping bunker-busting bombs on command and control centers, turning palaces into rubble while the city lights flickered below. The ability of the B-2 to carry up to 40,000 pounds of ordnance meant that a single aircraft could strike 80 separate targets in a single pass, rippling huge 500-pound JDAMs in a calculated sequence that decimated entire tank columns or airfield infrastructures in seconds. They were untrackable, unstoppable, and relentlessly precise. However, the legend of the B-2's invincibility was shattered not by enemy fire, but by the chaotic indifference of physics and weather. On February 23, 2008, the Spirit of Kansas taxied onto the runway at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. It was a routine rotation, a show of force in the Pacific Theater. As the massive bomber roared down the runway, lifting its nose into the humid tropical air, something went wrong. The flight control computers, the electronic brains that kept the unstable flying wing in the air, began to receive garbage data. Heavy rains earlier in the week had seeped into the skin-flush air data sensors, causing moisture to accumulate. The computers, thinking the aircraft was flying at a different attitude and speed than it actually was, commanded a sudden, violent pitch. The bomber stalled instantly. In the terrifying video of the incident, the left wing dips and drags along the tarmac, sparking furiously before the entire 172-foot wingspan cartwheels into the ground. The two pilots ejected milliseconds before impact, their rocket chairs blasting them away from the fireball that consumed the most expensive aircraft ever built. The Spirit of Kansas was reduced to a charred scar on the runway, a $1.4 billion loss caused by a few drops of water. It was a humbling reminder that for all its alien technology, the B-2 was still a machine, subject to the frailties of the physical world. The fleet was grounded, the sensors were redesigned, and the procedures were overhauled. The B-2 rose from the ashes of the Guam crash to fight again, this time adapting to a new kind of warfare in the deserts of North Africa. In 2011, during Operation Odyssey Dawn, the B-2 South were the first to kick down the door of Muammar Gaddafi's regime in Libya. Flying from Missouri once again, they targeted the hardened aircraft shelters of the Libyan Air Force. The mission required the B-2 South to drop 2,000-pound bombs on Gardabia airfield. The strikes were surgical. The hardened shelters were imploded, burying Gaddafi's MiGs and Sukhoi under tons of concrete, effectively grounding the Libyan Air Force in a single night. The B-2 South returned home, the round trip taking 25 hours, proving that the Spirit remained the premier option for kicking off a war when the enemy has valid air defenses. Years later, the B-2 would return to Libyan skies, but this time the enemy was different. In 2017, the Islamic State ISIS had established training camps in the Libyan desert, remote outposts where they believed they were safe from Western reach. Operation Odyssey Lightning saw the B-2S called upon to act as the ultimate sniper. The target was a pair of camps south of Sirte. The B-2 South, loaded with over 100 precision-guided munitions, flew the familiar long-haul route from Whiteman. This mission demonstrated a terrifying evolution in the bomber's capability, the ability to loiter and clean up. The B-2 South didn't just drop one bomb per target. They saturated the camps. As the terrorists scrambled from their tents, the B-2 South, coordinating with drones and special operations forces, unleashed a rain of JDAMs that left nothing but craters. It was a massive overkill, a sledgehammer used to crush a scorpion, but it sent a clear message. There is no sanctuary. The pilots described the mission as a thunder run, the sky erupting with the distinct, rhythmic thumping of 80 bombs impacting in rapid succession, churning the desert floor into a moonscape of destruction. The drama of the B-2 Spirit lies not just in its combat record, but in the atmosphere that surrounds it. It is a creature of the night. Pilots speak of the eerie sensation of flying the B-2. It is quiet, smooth, and because it lacks a tail, it sometimes feels like it is sliding through the air rather than cutting through it. The cockpit is a capsule of isolation, bathed in the glow of monitors, suspended 40,000 feet above a sleeping world. Refueling in flight a necessity for its global reaches, a high-stakes ballet performed in the dark, the pilot must guide the massive bat-like aircraft behind a KC-135 or KC-10 tanker, matching speed while flying in the tanker's turbulent wake. The boom operator in the tanker sees the B-2 slowly emerge from the darkness like a creeping shadow, a sight that still unsettles even veteran aircrews. A mistake here could be catastrophic, tearing the delicate stealth coating, or causing a collision that would destroy 2 aircraft and kill multiple airmen. Yet they do it again and again, over the Atlantic, over the Pacific, over the desolate ice of the Arctic, ensuring that the Spirit is always within striking distance of its target. The maintenance of the B-2 is a saga in itself, a constant battle against entropy. The stealth coating, a classified material that absorbs radar waves, is fragile and requires thousands of hours of painstaking care. Every screw, every panel seam, every gap must be taped, filled, and painted with a precision that rivals brain surgery. The maintainers at Whiteman AFB work in climate-controlled docks, treating the aircraft like a living patient. They are the unsung heroes who ensure that when the president calls, the phone is answered. The cost of this maintenance is astronomical, leading to endless political debates. But every time a rogue nation builds a deeper bunker or a better radar, the value of the B-2 becomes undeniable. It is the only aircraft in the U.S. inventory that combines long-range, massive payload, and stealth. It can carry the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator MOP, a 30,000-pound bomb designed to smash through mountains and destroy nuclear facilities buried deep underground. The B-2 is the delivery system for the ultimate ultimatum. As the years pass, the B-2 Spirit has transitioned from a new, controversial technology to an aging warrior. The skin is wrinkled, the avionics are being retrofitted, and the airframes are tired. The announcement of its successor, the B-21 Raider, signals the beginning of the end for the Spirit fleet. But the transition is slow, and the B-2 remains the heavyweight champion of the skies. It is still the aircraft that gets the call when the target is heavily defended and absolutely must be destroyed. It has flown over the Super Bowl, a jagged silhouette against the celebratory fireworks, and it has flown over the darkest corners of the earth, a silhouette against the burning fires of war. The legacy of the B-2 is etched in the history of aerial warfare. It proved that stealth was not a gimmick, but a prerequisite for survival in the modern age. It proved that the flying wing was not a failed experiment, but the optimal shape for the future. It shrank the globe, making any dictator, terrorist, or strategic target vulnerable to a strike launched from the middle of the American continent. The B-2 Spirit is more than a bomber. It is a symbol of technological dominance, a dark angel that rides the jet stream, unseen and unheard until the moment the ground erupts. From the drawing boards of Jack Northrop to the caves of Afghanistan, from the rainy runway in Guam to the skies over Baghdad, the story of the B-2 is a testament to human ingenuity and the terrifying pursuit of the ultimate weapon. It is the ghost in the machine, the thunder in the silence, the spirit that haunts the nightmares of America's enemies. As the sun sets over Whiteman Air Force Base, the hangars hum with activity. The doors slide open, revealing the dark, sleek shapes inside. The crews climb the ladders, the engines whine to life, and the spirits taxi out to the runway, looking like shards of the night sky that have fallen to earth. They take off, banking into the darkness, disappearing from sight and from radar, on their way to nowhere, or perhaps, on their way to everywhere. The world sleeps, unaware that the spirits are watching, patrolling the high frontier, ready to deliver their silent, devastating judgment at a moment's notice. The pilots who fly these machines are a rare breed, selected for their ability to endure the isolation and the immense responsibility of their payload. They are the Spirit Keepers, entrusted with a weapon that can level a city or surgically remove a single building. Their mission logs are filled with the longest combat sorties in history, flights that test the limits of human physiology. They have watched the sun rise and set from the same cockpit, refueled over oceans where no ships sail, and struck targets in countries they will never set foot in. They share a bond forged in the quiet intensity of the stealth mission, knowing that they are the tip of the spear, the first to cross the line, the ones who kick down the door so the rest of the force can follow. In the end, the B-2 Spirit is a paradox. It is a weapon of mass destruction designed to keep the peace. It is a highly visible symbol of American power that relies on being invisible. It is a relic of the Cold War that defined the wars of the 21st century. As it flies into its final decade of service, the B-2 remains a marvel of engineering and a stark reminder of the lengths to which humanity will go to master the skies. The battles it has fought: Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya are chapters in a book that is still being written, and until the last Spirit touches down for the final time, the world will always have to wonder what is hiding in the shadows overhead.